Good evening. Thank you, everyone, and welcome. My name's Kira. I'm the director here at the library. So I am very, very excited to welcome Virginia Evans, who is the author of The Correspondent, which is not just my favorite book of this year, and frankly, my favorite book of quite a long time, but I would say it's Darien Library's favorite book of the year. I think you would be hard-pressed to find a librarian. 100%. I don't think we have a staff member here in the building who hasn't read the book and absolutely fallen in love with it and fallen in love with Sybil, and I can tell that a lot of you are also big fans. Virginia Evans attended James Madison University, where she received a bachelor's in English literature, and after starting her family, she went back to school for her master's in creative writing at Trinity College in Dublin, where she got to study under Carlo Gabler, Owen MacMee, Claire Keegan, one of my favorites, Harry Clifton, and Kevin Power. I mean, just an amazing powerhouse of mentors right there. Virginia now lives in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, with her husband, her 2 children, and her red Labrador. The Correspondent is astonishingly her first book. I'm imagining it's her first published book because, I mean, incredible. And Virginia will be in conversation with her good friend and fellow novelist, Karen Dukess, who is the author of The Last Book Party and Welcome to Murder Week. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Virginia and Karen.
Okay. Hello. So nice to see everyone here. I'm thrilled to be interviewing Virginia. I have to say that I was fortunate enough to read The Correspondent before it came out, and I know Virginia's editor, and I wrote her to say what an astonishing book this was. And I looked back at the email recently, and what I wrote to her was, I said, it's a beautiful original novel, a book for grown-ups by and about a grown-up, which in itself is a rare and welcome thing. The other thing I realized was when I asked Virginia back before the book came out, remember I asked you about your book tour and where you were going, and you said to me, I don't really have a book tour. My agent said that no one really knows me, so I shouldn't really plan anything. And you said, nobody is calling for my presence. And I just want to say,
they were not.
Really?
They were not.
This book is not just a great book. I just read it for the second time and I loved it even more. But it's a bit of a phenomenon. I mean, it's a huge phenomenon. Unusual for any novel, let alone a first published novel. We have a lot of things to talk about. Your writing journey is so interesting. The publication journey, what's happened to this book since it was published is so interesting. But let's start out by talking about the book itself. I'm just curious, how many people here have read the book? Okay, wait. Let's try that a different way. How many people have not read the book?
You don't
yet?
have to put up your hand if you didn't read the book.
No. I really want to know how many have not read the book. Okay, so there won't be spoilers, but that's really interesting. Okay, so it's an epistolary novel, which I'm sure you all know, being an educated crowd. That means it's written in letters. I can describe the novel, but it's always nice to hear how the author describes it. And I'm sure you've had a bit of practice in this. So can you succinctly describe the novel, and then we'll get into all the nitty-gritty about it.
I have had some time to practice this. To me, the book is the story of a whole life from kind of beginning to end, a whole life. And that was what I wanted to write. I wanted to have that sort of viewpoint on somebody. And when Ann Patchett blurbed the book, she said it's a portrait of a life, and I do think that's what it ends up being. I also sort of think of it as a puzzle, because it's written in letters. You're, reading these letters kind of one by one, and it doesn't tell the story linearly. You're sort of putting together things that happened in the past and things that are happening in the present, and little bit by little bit, I think you're putting a puzzle piece with every letter kind of into its spot. And then by the end, what I hope is you have a portrait of someone's life. And this someone is this woman that has taken on a life of her own. And people speak to me as if I know her. And, I was at an event last night and someone said, why didn't she? I'm not going to say what in the book happened. And I was sort of like, I don't know. I just how I wrote it. I don't know.
Well, you do know her. So I'm curious, which came first? The idea of writing a book in letters or Sybil, the character?
It's been a while since I wrote this book now, but I think, if I remember it right, I think I had read, there's a book, 84 Charing Cross Road. Have people read that book? People love that book. It's a great book. I had read that book, and I loved the feeling of reading that book. I love that feeling of kind of letter by letter. I loved all that negative white space on the pages. It feels very forgiving as a reader to have so much white space. It's like a chapter every other page, which feels good. And I just loved the warmth of that. I loved the way that you were in the weeds with those characters that wrote those letters. And so then I started to think about that, how I wanted that book to be longer, and I wanted it to be more, and I wanted it to include like love and loss, and be more of a saga. So then I started to think I would want to write that. I think most writers, when you are starting to think of a new book, you're sort of wanting to write what you're wanting to read. At least that's true for me. And that was what I wanted to read. And I think that kind of idea was coming from this direction. And then I think maybe coming from this direction was this person that I was starting to hear and see. And her name's Sybil. And I will say when she kind of came to me, I had met this woman through a really strange set of circumstances, which are actually simple to explain, which is that I wrote this woman who was a stranger a letter and asked her if I could buy her house, which was not for sale. And she said yes. And it was very strange. And so I went and met her. And she was kind of sparked this idea that became Sybil. When I started to think about who Sybil would be, I will say she pretty much arrived fully formed, and who she is and how she is and certain things that she has lived through kind of all arrived as a package, and I felt like I knew her, and I could become her pretty easily, I would say.
So it's interesting to me. So Sybil, when the novel starts out, Sybil is just turned 73. Is that right? It's her birthday. And so you're definitely not in your 70s. In my view, you're pretty young. But there's a lot of really eloquent and wise writing in this book about growing old and what it's like to grow old and still feel like you're 30. In one of the first letters in the book, Sybil writes to authors that she admires, as well as to friends and relatives. In a letter she writes to Anne Patchett, she writes about that amazement one feels at this stage of life, a sort of astonishment that is also confusion, which leads to a sort of worry or a sort of fear, I guess. How did we get here? How can it be? You're awfully young to be writing so well about being old. Do you have an inner old person, or what is this something you've thought a lot about, aging? Why do you think you created this character who is so much older than yourself?
That's a great question, and thank you for saying that is wise. I think I do have an old soul, which I've been told for a long time. I think I also I really enjoy speaking to people who are older than me, and I have always really enjoyed that. I think people that are older than me are so much more interesting than people that are my age, and there's just so much there. There's so much history. There's so much, people that are older than me have lived through things that I think are unbelievable, wars and political eras and, different things. It's okay, whoever that is, it's fine. Don't worry. And so I think just, that I just I've always enjoyed people that are older than me. And so I think, and I have some close relationships with people that are older than me. I spend a lot of time probably purposefully having conversations because I want to know things before I'm too late to know the things. When my grandfather will be 100 this month, and a couple years, I know, amazing. And a couple years ago, I interviewed him for a few hours and recorded it just because I thought, I want to have this. I just want to, of course, most of it was like, I don't remember, Don't ask me that.
You're a little late. You should have done it 20 years ago.
But anyway, I just think I think I probably listen when people tell me things, and it didn't feel hard for me to find what Sybil would think or feel. It felt really reachable to me.
So there's also, Sybil writes a lot about the fact that she spends her days writing letters, and she what was interesting to me, there's a lot in here about what's wonderful about letters, and then there's also some stuff about what's limiting in her life about letters. She calls them one of the original forms of civility in the world, and she says the letters amount to who I am, and then an email can in no way replace a written letter. I would sometimes wonder if part of the appeal of this book for younger readers is that letters are so bizarre to them. And you have a character in here, a high school girl, who says, "I've never received a letter," which is mind-boggling. Before we talk about the flip side of letters, have you always been a big letter writer? I mean, you wrote The Woman Whose House You Wanted to Buy, but did you write to authors when you were young? Were you a good correspondent?
I am a good correspondent, actually. I do write letters. I've always written letters. I'm not a prolific letter writer. I don't write like Sybil writes, but I write when the moment calls for it. I write when there's something that needs to be said in a way that can be kept, I think. I have always tried to write to authors and artists. I haven't even looked over here. Hello. I do try to write when I feel moved and I want to say, this, you moved me, or this moved me. I think letters, receiving a letter is a form of communication, I think, but it's also an artifact. And I just think that, I feel a little sick when I think people will not write letters anymore, and how much we have because of what people have written, and taken the time to say. So yeah, I wouldn't say I'm prolific, but I am consistent in letter writing.
But in this novel, letters are also a way that Sybil kind of controls her world and controls her communication, and they're also how she hides from the world. Can you talk about that a little bit? In what way does she have to sort of let go of letters a bit to make the most of the last years of her life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And it's funny because I think that the first response to the book is typically that, oh, the letters, like, it's so good, it's so good. But there really is something about the letters that is not good in her life, because she starts to kind of think through this a little bit, but it helps her, and it gives her a force field that, if she's writing to you in a letter, when you write someone a letter, you're kind of saying, I'm not having this conversation with you, I'm writing it, and then maybe we will have the conversation, or maybe we won't. And I think that it's like anything, there's the good of it, and then there's the sort of the horrible flip side of it, which is that she uses the letters as a distancing mechanism and a safety mechanism. And somebody asked me at an event I was doing last night, what is and I'm not going to spoil anything, I'll talk in code. Somebody asked me, what do you think is the turning point in this story? And I thought a lot about that, and there is a moment in the story where an unexpected visitor comes to stay with Sybil for a while. And this person is not a tidy, easy house guest. And I think that might be the turning point, is when she has to not be alone, and that she has to, somebody gets to bear witness to her life, where she has had so many years where nobody is bearing witness to her life. So yeah, it's definitely both. And I think I'm glad you asked that question, because I think it's maybe a too simple take on the novel to think, oh, the letters, how great. Because really it's, oh, the letters, great, and also sad, tragic in some ways.
Yeah, she's isolating herself at the same time. one of the joys of reading this novel is it's so surprising. Every time you turn the page, you don't know who the letter is going to be from or to. And, it starts out and you think you're reading a novel about this one woman, that it's kind of a small scope. But then you go so many places thematically. You have a Syrian refugee, you have a Holocaust survivor, you have, you're dealing with mental illness, family estrangement, loss, grief. There's a lot. Did these things and these characters just evolve as you got to know Sybil, or did you have certain things that you wanted to bring in to kind of show that everybody's individual small life is connected to the whole world?
That's a great question. I would say when I started writing it, I knew that there was one factor in Sybil's life, which without spoiling it is kind of the big thing, which I think you kind of spend the book trying to understand what is the big thing. And then I think by the end you do understand. And that kind of big factor of her life was part of when I started writing. I knew that was what I wanted her to be dealing with over time.
So early on, you knew that that's what you were writing towards.
Yes, that one piece. And then I would say, as I wrote, the most wonderful thing about Sybil, here I am talking about her like she's real. The most wonderful thing about Sybil is that she has lots of flaws. But the thing I think is the best quality about her is that she thinks everybody's the same. She thinks everybody's value is the same. And that's why she writes to everybody. She thinks everybody's just as valuable as the next person. And that's why she should write a letter to this person and that person. Because why should she not write a letter to any of these people? Because they're all valuable and she wants to talk to them. And I think as I was writing the book, my imagination could kind of go anywhere. If this is the kind of person she is, then she can write to anyone. And as I was writing it, I think in a desire to really show a full 360-degree view, or come as close as I felt like I could, of who she was as a person, it took lots of variety of relationships. People younger, people older, people intimately connected with her, people that are strangers, famous people, not famous people, the customer service representative at Ancestry.com or Kindred.com, which is my favorite series of correspondences in the book, because I was an online customer service agent. Yeah. Yes.
Did anyone ever write you?
I mean, I had some weird interactions. But I think, so as I was writing, it kind of just all emerged. But I think what happened is, as I was writing, I do think I kept thinking, she's this woman with this 70-odd year life behind her. So many things have happened. Like, if anyone here is Sybil's age, it's like, so many things have happened. And I think, when I first, I'm going to kind of say something that is going to help me answer this in a roundabout way. When I first met this woman that I was trying to buy her house, I remember we got to the house and she opened the door and she was standing on the porch, and she was this very petite, very put together, lovely, smart, kind of like beautiful little package. And she was standing on the porch and she opened the door and she said, "Oh, come on in, come see the house." And then we walked into her house and it's this stranger. And then she starts taking us around and she's saying, this art, there's this art on the wall from when I was in Jerusalem in whatever year. And here's a book that here's a music score that is on the piano. Oh, my husband, but we divorced, and that was years ago. And that was when we lived in, it was this whole interesting thing. And that was this thing that lodged in my mind, like, that visual of somebody, just a person that you see standing on their porch, it's just this glimpse, and you think, oh, there's that person, like snap image. But if you go inside their house and you start to take a tour and you go in all the rooms and you smell the house and you feel it and you see what's on the walls and what's on the tables and what's in the fridge, it's like, this is like a whole, that person is so interesting. And that, like, her life, that woman, Anne, that I was hoping to buy her house. It didn't work out. Really sad. It would be a much better story.
It kind of worked out in other ways.
It kind of worked out in other ways. She gave me Sybil. But, I think, we all know, I feel like my life and what I have lived through is a page turner. You all think that. We all think that about our own lives, I think. We think, like, you can't believe what has happened to me. You all think that. And you all think, like, you can't believe how hard it's been. You cannot believe what I have had to live through. You cannot believe the pain I've been through. You cannot believe the miracles that have happened in my life. All of you think that. We all think that. Because it's true. I think it's true.
I think this is in some ways like the part of why this book has touched people so much, because you're just sort of like, here's an ordinary woman, and then you tell this extraordinary story, and not just one story, but a series of stories. And it reminds me of this line in the book. It's near the end when she's writing to Larry McMurtry, and I love that she reads high, low, all different fiction, the Outlander series, but she says to him, "My life has been some strange balance of miraculous and mundane." And I think that's part of what's so appealing about the story. It's the sense that everybody's story is many stories and remarkable stories, even if they're just some ordinary seemingly ordinary 73-year-old woman on a porch. I have so many questions. Let's talk a little bit about your writing journey, because I know this is not your first novel. I think it's your 9th. Is that right? Can you tell us a little bit about your writing journey and how you nevertheless persisted?
It is kind of, I think, don't they say that it's like a form of madness to keep on doing something again and again without success and getting the same result? So there's that. But I started writing my first novel when I was 19, and I'm 39, and I think The Correspondent is my 9th novel. It might be there's pieces of, it's unclear. I took pieces, I broke novels up, I rewrote certain things. Anyway, it's something like that. And the writing journey for me was, for several years, and a few of those novels, I was learning how to write a novel. I never knew a writer. I don't come from a family of writers. I don't have a background, I didn't know what I was doing. And so I started writing novels, and I think what I was doing was teaching myself to write. So I would always write one and take that, takes a couple years, and kind of get to the end and think, I can do that better, and then start again and do that. And probably maybe 4 novels in, I started to explore how you get published, not really understanding that either. So this was like, I think there was definitely Google, but I think I was sort of like using the Writer's Almanac, which is the like big brick of a book that people used to use. I still have it, which is unhinged. But so then I was teaching myself, you have to write as a writer, you have to pitch yourself. You're like cold calling agents, and you're saying, I wrote this book, you should take me on. And it's like a low success rate. Is the understatement of the year. It's like an extremely low success rate. So I think I have queried probably like 700 agents in my life, which is, again, we're like putting this all in the bucket of the madness, I think. And so then that I did have an agent at some point in the mid 2010s, and then we were working on a novel that I thought was gonna. You think if you get the agent, you think, okay, I did it. Like, I got the agent, now I can move freely. And that was not the case. And so I had a really tough time with that agent, and we worked on that novel for about a year, and then it went sideways. So then that got abandoned. And then I was demoralized, and I self-published a book. Okay, I self-published one of my novels because we were hard up for money, and my computer died, and I'm trying to write books, and I'm like, how can I make money to buy a computer? And so I self-published one of my books.
Is that such a great way to make money?
Well, But like the margin is pretty good. Like if you sell a book on, if you sell,
Do you get the computer?
I made exactly enough to buy a computer, and I bought the computer. The computer came in the mail. This shining, gleaming new computer, laptop. I was so excited. It was one of these slim, beautiful MacBooks, and I set the thing on the bed, and I was just like gazing at it all day, moving throughout. And my husband got home from work, and he was changing, and he took off his belt and tossed his belt onto the bed and dinged the top of the thing, my brand new computer, on the first day. That's part of my writing journey. So then...
I think that might be part of your marital journey.
I know. He was really sorry. He actually was. He knew what I had been through to get that computer, and he was like, oh my... It was bad. It was really bad. We made it through. And so then... at some point I lost heart. I was pretty demoralized. We decided to move to Europe. This is crazy. I know I sound crazy. We decided we're going to move to Europe because we wanted to. And so then we thought, well, what will get us to Europe? And my husband said, I cannot learn a foreign language right now. So he said, where will we go? I said, what if I go to grad school for writing? Maybe this, and then I can teach. So I applied to schools in Ireland, England, and Scotland, and we ended up moving to Dublin. So I got my master's in Dublin. We brought our whole family. Our children were 3 and 6 when we moved. It was the best thing we've ever done, the best time we've ever had. I could write a whole other book about why you should all take a year and move with your family somewhere very far away. Got my degree. That was pretty life-changing for me. That education was something that I don't think you need. I don't think you need that. But I gained so much understanding about writing fiction. And it really changed me. It changed who I was as a person. It changed who I was as a mother. It changed who I was as a citizen of the world. And it changed who I was as a writer. And then I wrote for a part of my coursework a novel, which then got me my new agent. And she's wonderful, and I love her. And she should be, if she was here, I would have her sit with me because she goes along with this whole process. She should be sitting right here. And she tried to sell that book, and it wouldn't sell. I mean, it's a lot of failure. And this is something I actually like to talk about because it doesn't feel bad to me to say that it was a lot of failure. A lot of people say it wasn't failure. It was getting to now. But it was failure. And that's okay. And that's okay. You know? I never want to stop keeping one hand back on all of that to remember what it took. So then I wrote that book. That book was great. I still think it's the best book I've ever written. It didn't sell. I started to write another book. I then got spooked. I didn't want to write it, so then I started writing The Correspondent. I wrote The Correspondent inside a very small closet during COVID. And we were living in a really tiny rental. There was no space. There was a closet. I shoved my desk inside. Fluorescent tube lighting overhead. Really bleak. I wrote The Correspondent. I wasn't going to sell it. I wasn't going to show it to anyone.
How long did it take to write it?
I think it took me less than a year.
Were you sharing any of it along the way? Did you have a writing group or friends that read it? Nobody?
None. Mm-mm. Me in the closet from 4:30 a.m. to 7 a.m. every day.
Wow. And can you tell us a little bit about the dreamy part of selling it?
Yes. Okay. So this is where the story turns. So then my agent says to me, what have you been doing in the closet every day at 4:30 in the morning? And I'm like, nothing. I'm just cleansing my palate. That's what I always said. I'm cleansing my palate. She's like, okay. It's her livelihood too. She's like, could you do something effective here? And so I wrote the book, and she sort of said, could I read it? And I said, no, I'm not going to sell it. And she said, let me read it. And I said, no, I wrote in the voice of Joan Didion. I'm seriously not going to publish it. And she said, okay, let me see it. So I gave it to her. She said, we can sell this. And I was like, yeah, okay. Everybody always says that.
Wait, hold on. Why do you think you were so unsure about it?
I just wasn't.
Because it's pretty good.
Well, I didn't. I just didn't. I thought it was crazy. I don't know. I was just writing it for myself. I just was writing it for myself. I think I was about ready to give up. I think I was thinking about going to law school, and I just thought, this is so stupid. And so so she read it, and she said, I think we can sell this book. And I was kind of like, you always say that. And so, so she took it out, and I did say, this is I'm not doing this again. I can't do this again. I'm saying all of this with a lens of humor because you cannot imagine how agonizing it was for all that time. I mean, it was so terrible. It's terrible to give all of your heart and energy to something and have it rejected for like a long time, like my whole adult life until now. So it was really painful, and I went to dark places in those years, just thinking, what am I doing? But it's like, I have to do this, but also, why am I doing this? This is a huge, huge error of judgment. And I said to Hillary, my agent, I think if this book doesn't sell, I think I'm going to apply to law school. I think I'd be a good lawyer. I'm smart. Look at this smart brain I have. I can do it. She was like, you're making a mistake. And so then she took it out. She took it out in March of 2023. She took it to some editors in New York, and she pitches. She's sort of old school, and she pitches in person. So she goes and holds meetings, and she lives in Toronto. She goes and holds meetings for a week, and she pitches her books. And so she pitched it to a good group of editors, and she was pitching it to a junior editor at an imprint, and in like a round table kind of thing with a bunch of editors, and she was pitching a handful of books from her agency, which is Canadian. And she was pitching my book to a junior agent. Nobody knows me. It's a debut. It's kind of weird. It's written in letters. She's kind of like seeing kind of fishing for who will take it. And then my editor, who's like not a small little fish editor.
She's very big. She's very well known and very good.
Very good. She pulled my agent aside after the meeting and said, I want that book you were talking about the old lady. So we gave it to her, and then it was just radio silence for a while, and then
How long?
like 3 months, 2 months, I think. Nobody wanted it. Nobody took the bait. Nobody said yes. And then all of a sudden, on my birthday, Amy bought the book. And then it was sort of like a rocket ship.
That's a nice story. I just have one more question before we go to questions. I have a question, and then I have a statement. The question is, you have opened yourself up to what I'm sure is a flood of letters from readers. How are you? I mean, you can't possibly answer them all, I imagine. And how many are there, and how are you dealing with that?
Okay, there are hundreds. And if you are sitting here today and you're looking at me being like, I wrote to you and you did not write me back, I am sorry. And I am trying to respond, but I have small children and I do not have a nanny, and there's like laundry and dinner and like this book tour. And so I'm not keeping up. I'm not Sybil. Okay. But it has been crazy. It's been really, really, it's amazing. My bookstore receives mail for me. Every time I go in once a week, there's a huge pile that I take home. I do read everything. I usually try to pull out a few from the stack and respond. It means a lot to me. When I was 10 years ago, probably 10 years ago, when I was in the process of trying and failing to be a published author, I wrote a letter to Ann Patchett. And I was telling her what I thought about her book Commonwealth, which I love that book. I know that's a question,
Sybil wrote her about State of Wonder, right?
Yep. Okay. Sybil wrote her about State of Wonder.
You're not Sybil.
I'm not Sybil. I wrote her about, I did not write about State of Wonder. And she wrote back to me, and she has been my pen pal for 10 years. And she saw me through every terrible, dark day of failure. Every time I had something horrible happen, I would write to her and say, "And I can't do it." And she would say, "Yes, you can. Do it again. Go back. Do it again. Do it again." So I don't want to miss a chance to help somebody if I can.
That's nice. Okay, so we're going to open it up to questions, and the important point of what I just said is questions. So I'm sure there are many people here who love this book so much that they want to get up and tell Virginia in person how much they love the book, but we want to get her talking more about the book. So please, if you have a question, we would love to hear it.
She asked what the process was for me kind of like putting the book together, how it sort of got put together. It's a great question. I don't have a great answer. I do not outline. I did not think about it ahead of time. I just kind of started. And I mean, it went through, I revised many times and moved things around and added things and took things out. But it was sort of, okay. Claire Keegan says that when you're writing a book, I don't know how I'm going to do this with holding this microphone, but I'm going to try.
I'll hold it.
Okay, Claire Keegan says when you're writing a book, you're doing a French braid. Okay, so imagine those hippie beads that hung in doorways. Are you following me? Yeah. Okay, so the beads are hanging down. Here's the beads. You have to gather all the strands of beads. Sorry, you're behind me. You have to gather all the strands of beads and make a French braid. This is how you write a novel. And you have to get every strand into the braid. So at the end of the braid, all the strands are in the elastic. She says, if you get to the end and one of the strands is not in the elastic, you cut it from the top. So this helped me understand how to write fiction. And this was helpful for me with this. So when I was writing the story, I started with all these different people and these different ways they're connected to Sybil. And so it was a way of how do you get every person to sort of weave its way through the French braid and be there at the end? And that's the best answer I have.
That's a good answer. Right there.
She asked about the aspect of the book, which this is not a spoiler, from the beginning. Sybil lost a child young. That was the piece of her story I knew from the beginning. That was the one thing I knew, that she was a woman in her 70s and she had lost a child when she was a young mom. And that was kind of it's sort of like the backbone of her story, I think.
Can I interrupt
please.
Add on to that question? Did you know about the aspect of losing the child that the reader finds out at the end of the book?
Not initially. And so kind of this is a good question. Thank you. Because really that thing that happened to her in her life is what everything else sits on top of. In the whole story, every relationship, every way that she errs and every way that she is kind and wonderful goes back in some way to that. And I just felt like I knew that about her and that was who she was. The book, if you ask me what the book's about, I say the book is about long grief over a long time. So I have not. But I know people who have, and I use my imagination and what I fear. They're all fiction. They're really not based on anyone. It all comes... No, I just have talked to a lot of people probably. But I will say Sybil's nature is very like my mother-in-law. And my mother-in-law is very dear to me. We're very, very close. I adore her. And she is very like Sybil in the way she communicates, the way she moves through the world, her directness, her bluntness, the way she sees everybody as equal. This is very like my mother-in-law. And so when I was writing Sybil, sometimes if I felt stuck, I would say, what would Joyce do? Or what would Joyce say? And that's how I would get there.
Does she see herself in Sybil?
Yeah, she read the book and she called me and she said, "It's me. It's me." And I was like, "It's not you, but it's like really, really closely adjacent." She said, wait, there was something she said, I wouldn't have something about the cat. She was like, I wouldn't have done that. Or so, there was one thing that she thought Sybil took it too far, and she was like, I would never have done that.
Way in the back.
I think Sybil, in my mind, she's kind of real to me as a person, and I think, she's living in the 2000s, and email's part of life, and, her garden club is conducted over email, and her, things have to be done over email. I sort of think of her as, like, begrudgingly taking to email, like, okay, I have to send, it's like, there's no way other than sending an email, I liked writing the emails because it was really, like, fun to write the emails. Two things about the emails. I've heard on the audio that when she has the back and forths with the customer service agent, it says, like, re, which is really annoying, and I'm really sorry. And I also want to say that one of my favorite parts of the book is when she's writing the email to James Landy when Harry arrives at her house, and it's all, like,
she makes all the mistakes, yeah, because she's so stressed.
It's so good. I can't believe I'm laughing at myself.
But I get the feeling that you had a lot of fun. Like, you were writing about Sybil, but you got to be all these other characters with different voices.
It was so fun. Yeah, it was really fun. Yeah. She asked the authors that I chose to have her write to, and also the list of authors that she reads, or her best friend Rosalie reads, how did I choose, like, who to pick? It's really just my own personal reading list. I just like most of those, not all of them, but most of the books are just books I like and authors I like, and I just it felt easy to make Sybil's reading taste and Rosalie's reading taste my own. But yeah, it was just fun to imagine. I had to. You can only write in the voice of someone who's no longer living. So the only times you read in the voice of a real person are Joan Didion and Larry McMurtry. And
that's why Anne Patchett doesn't write
yeah,
back.
that's why you don't hear from Anne or Kazuo Ishiguro or all these other people. So that was like a legal thing. So that, but I just thought they were just, I just picked them because I liked them. Simple answer, yeah.
Can you repeat the question?
She asked, who did I leave out? Like, if I would have wanted to write in people's voices, who would I would have? Originally, I did have a response from Kazuo Ishiguro, and I had to delete that. Just, I think he's so smart and, like, interesting, and it was fun to kind of imagine what he would say. But this was when I didn't think the book was ever going to be read by anyone else. And then when we sold it, I mean, I called my editor, and I was like, we need some legal people to read this book to make sure we're okay. I grew up there, though. Yeah, I grew up in Severna Park, which is a little bit adjacent to where she grew up, which is Arnold. Oh, okay. She'd be friends with Sybil. It felt like an easy reach, It didn't really matter where she was from in some ways, and so it felt easy for me to access that place. And I liked that it was by the water, and it just felt right for her. Yeah. She asked about, like, how characters come to me, and also a question about if I had any say in the audio. I really did not. But they did such a good job. It's really cool. It feels like a BBC radio play. It's so cool. It has all the different people are cast, and it's really, really neat. I don't know. I actually feel like, I don't know what you would say about this. I'm going to turn this back to you. I think the first draft is hard. Just the raw imagination of characters. That feels like the hardest part for me. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, that's my least favorite part, and the part where I procrastinate the most. And then once I know I have a story, I can relax, and then I can revise all day.
That's exactly how I feel. And so to me, coming up with characters out of the ether is it's hard. It's really hard, and I don't have like, they do not come to me like in a nice way. It's sort of like a fight. Yeah. How many drafts? Yeah. I don't know. 5, 7, 9. I don't know. A lot. A lot of drafts. That is the question. She asked if I'll publish the book I said was my best book. I don't know. I don't know if I will. I mean, if somebody wants it, maybe, but you want it. I'll send you the PDF. You can all read it. It is It is a
That's
very...
what you should do. Tell people, write me. If you write me,
I'll send you the
I
PDF.
won't write you back. I don't have time, but here's the PDF.
Here's the PDF of my last novel. That's actually not a bad idea.
Now go away.
Donation only. That one is really different. It's a really different novel. I lost your face. There you are. It's a really different novel. It's a very literary Vietnam War era Americana, kind of like heavy slow burn. So this is not what people are expecting from me next, unfortunately. But maybe, my editor knows I want to publish it, and maybe I will one day.
Are you working on something else
Yeah.
now that is more in this vein?
Yes, I'm
Yes.
writing a book right now. I'm hoping to, I guess I would hope it would come out sometime before 2030. I think it's going to be good, but it's about the making of a movie. Yeah, she was asking as a follow-up about what I said about how graduate school changed my life. Okay, this is the hill I'll die on. So you opened a can of worms. I was born in America. I was raised in America. My husband was born in America and raised in America. And we, you embark on life, and it's sort of, I think, kind of becoming an adult. It's sort of like jumping into a river with a really strong current, and you don't really have a lot of say in some ways. I think you do, but then it's like, we got married, and then it's like you have a job, and then you have a house and a mortgage, and then maybe a bigger house, and maybe a kid or a dog, or like vice versa, or like, in some order. And our life, I think, I'll speak for myself, our life took on this quality of it's going, and there's no stopping this train. Like, you can't get off. And we were both really unhappy. And I said to my husband, he was working in a job that was grueling, he didn't like. I was trying to write fiction from 4:30 in the morning to 7 and then going to work, and we were raising our kids, and we had this house that was too much, and our life was too much, and it felt like that's what everybody's doing, That's what it feels like everybody's doing. And I remember he came downstairs, he had been putting my daughter to bed, and he came downstairs, and I was peeling stickers out of the rug. And I said, he walked in the room, and I was like, why are we doing any of it? What are we doing? I don't know. And he kind of sat on the couch, and he was like, yeah, I don't know. And I said, I don't think I'm happy. And he said, I don't think I'm happy either. But there was no good reason. Like, we had a good life, and we got kids, and I love him. We like each other. We laugh, that feels like enough. And we just kind of looked at each other, and I was like, I don't think it has to be this way. I just don't think it has to be this way. And so we just burned it all to the ground. We sold everything. We gave everything away, quit our jobs, and moved over there. And we moved into a 400 square foot apartment, and we had moved out of this 2,500 square foot house that was a big old beautiful house with a yard, moved into this tiny little apartment in Dublin. And we have never been happier than when we were living there in that small way, with no car and no extras and, just very little. So we lived on very little, in a very little footprint. And I was writing full time in school. And so I was totally alive, and I was learning, and my husband wasn't working, and he kept the kids, and he cooked, and he got to be with them all day, every day. And he loved it. It was just like we were just shaking off all of that. And it felt like, I remember we got to Dublin the first day, we had like all of our things packed into like 10 suitcases, and we're like standing on the curb outside of this apartment that we've never seen, in a country we've never set foot in. And I never will forget standing there, and we just had this overnight flight, and our kids are 3 and 6, and everybody's kind of like looking around like, what did we just do? And I looked at Mark, and I was like, I feel great. And he was like, I have never felt this good. So it was like that the whole time. It was just like that. So it was the education, but it was more, we learned a whole nother way of living. Irish people live differently than American people do. And what is important in Irish families, and it's not what it is here. It doesn't feel the same. I never was asked one time when we lived in Ireland, what do you do? Nobody ever asked me that question. That's the only thing people ask when they meet you in the US typically is, hey, oh, nice to meet you. What do you do? And that's like a way of stratifying, what you're worth. It's just not valued there. It's like, where are your people from? Who do you pull for in rugby is like the question. So it just changed our lives. We came back. We hope to move there again one day. It taught us like there's just another way to be. There's another way to live. So that was a long answer, but yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, I stay in touch with my professors pretty well. Studying under, I am loosely in touch with Claire. She keeps very much to herself. She keeps her life and mind quiet, which I really respect. I do communicate with my other professors a good bit, specifically Carlo Gebler. His mother was Edna O'Brien, who died recently. And he edits all my work for me before it goes out, and I now edit his work too, which is really cool. And sort of like read it, kind of read it for content or whatever. And he also teaches creative writing in the paramilitary prison on the border in Ireland, and I'm embarking on teaching writing in the prisons where I live, and so he's kind of helping me like develop my curriculum and stuff. So yeah.
All right, I think that's it. Thank you.